Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org. Hi, this is Bill Kenower of Author Magazine, and today I'm at Seattle Public Library's Microsoft Auditorium with Peter Heller, author of The Painter. Peter, welcome to Author.
It's awesome to be here. I love Seattle.
So Peter, I want you to think back. I want you to think back to your early life. When did you first recognize that you cared about stories, just in any shape or form?
Perfect question to ask in the Central Library of Seattle, because my dad used to read to me every night before I went to bed. He had me on E.E. Cummings when I was like 6.
What?
Which is sort of grounds for social services.
Yeah, okay.
If you think about some of those poems. But luckily I didn't understand them, but I loved the music of them. I can still remember, Buffalo Bill's Defunct Who Used to Ride.
Yeah.
But I was in my little school library when I was 11, and the librarian was named Annie Bosworth, and she had helped me along with my reading since I was 5. So she, a great librarian, they know, just like a great bookseller who had a relationship with over the years. So she took me over to the fiction shelf, and she pulled off In Our Time by Ernest Hemingway, that short collection of stories.
Yeah.
And I brought it home. And they're mostly, up in Michigan, Nick Adams stories. I brought that home, and imagine a kid who's 11 in Brooklyn, opening. I read that, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to.
Really? So you could enter Hemingway's world, because it can be a little oblique sometimes for a younger person.
These stories were pretty simple. I mean, there's Big Two-Hearted River. I remember reading that.
Where's the villain? You didn't have a problem with that?
No, all I wanted to do was jump off a slow train and have a backpack.
Yeah.
Have the dew wet my pant legs, camp by the Big Two-Hearted River, not burn my tongue on cowboy coffee, just like Nick. I didn't know what that was. It sounded awesome. But mostly what I wanted was to write like that. I mean, I felt, even at 11, I felt like, great writing just comes through your skin, not through your head and through your heart. And I wanted to do that. And so I did. That's when I started doing everything that I'd heard that you're supposed to do when you want to be a great writer.
Interestingly, your career began, your book writing career began writing nonfiction and experiences you'd had. And so you had to write about something that you did, but you weren't doing it anymore.
Right.
But you had to recreate it so that people could experience what you experienced. Still an act of imagination. Marvelous
too, because you not only relive the experience, if you're, say, running a hard river in a kayak.
Right.
You're feeling again, the waves hitting and the anxiousness of coming into a canyon. And at the same time, there's something else going on where you're synthesizing, you're bringing in the context of your whole life, and you're reimagining it, you're recreating it, and it's new again. It's new, and it carries meaning, writing about it. It carries certain kinds of meaning that it didn't have when you first experienced it.
Yes.
So I felt very lucky having, I would get paid to go on these assignments, to go, kayak these crazy things in Tibet or whatever.
Which you have done anyway, probably.
Oh, God, if I could have afforded it.
Right.
But then to get to come back and relive it and then sort of create a meaning, that wouldn't have been there if I hadn't had to write the story.
That's what I love about what we'll loosely call memoir, which is writing about some portion of your life, is there's what you learned when you had the experience, because you changed in some way, and then there's the writing about it, and you learn again, don't you? Even though you've already had the experience, you learn again in sifting it down to a story.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's wonderful. It's like, it's like going to double feature.
Yeah.
In a way.
And so, which kind of leads me to The Painter, because it struck me that you had this whole life as an adventure writer and a man who did a lot of very adventurous things, experienced things in the physical world that a lot of people wouldn't dream to do. And The Painter is about violence to some degree, about life, how it plays a role in our lives. And I couldn't help but to imagine all the things you've done, and even though no one was attacking you, the natural world has its own kind of violence to it. It will take you.
Sure.
and it doesn't care.
No.
And did that relate to, as you went into this book, did that in any way bring itself to this novel?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, this novel is about a man with, certain violent impulses and tendencies, but I think also a man with a huge heart, generous heart, and at times a very gentle spirit, a very complicated person. He finds solace in nature, and I do too. I mean, I think, all those experiences out doing the wild stuff out in nature, I think I learned two things. I learned about characters under pressure, which is you need for fiction. Yeah. And so you can get that in nature. You can get that.
You were under pressure.
Because I was under pressure a lot, and
you saw people under pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So even though this, what happens to Jim is person on person, but in nature, your character goes under pressure, and there's fear, and there's dread, and there's relief. And it also taught me, being out there so much taught me that I never feel so at home and so connected and so integrated as when I'm in wild country.
Yeah.
I love that. And Jim is the same way.
Well, yeah.
Well, he's that way in nature, and he's that way when he's painting.
Yeah.
And in both places, he can forget himself.
And surely when you're writing, you forget yourself. I mean, there's no greater pleasure, right, than entering the dream and forgetting.
Disappearing.
Right?
Totally.
It's great. It's
awesome.
It's the best.
It's the best. And that's what Jim describes
Yeah.
in his painting, because he talks about that process, and he says that he just disappears.
Yeah. And you really do. You become like transparent.
And the other thing that's interesting is, I don't paint, but as you said, I do write, and I think there's there's obviously a lot of analogy. But my character, Jim Stegner, he never knew what he was going to paint. In the same way that I approached the novel with the first line, he never knew what he was going to paint when he came to the canvas.
Right.
And so it was such a thrill just stepping up with him and seeing what he was going to spread on the palette, what colors, and then what he was going to do with it. And I was always surprised. And it was so thrilling because the paintings, when they were finished, every section in the book begins with a catalog raisonné of a painting. It's like, horse and crow, oil on linen, 20 by 30 inches, whatever. So you follow the story through the paintings, and every time he finished a painting, I would look at it and I'd be like, wow, that is so metaphorically or symbolically or tonally or in some poetic way, it's so resonant with what's going on with him right now in the story. That was cool.
It is. This is so familiar to me. I hear this again and again from every writer I know, which is, I don't know how, but somehow these two threads that I put down that I never planned on it, they met. And when I teach writers, that's the hardest thing for them to learn to trust, that they don't have to know everything. It will come together if they let it. You know what I mean?
It's a lot of faith.
Woo.
And a lot of letting go.
You start looking forward to it, but at first it's very hard to believe it'll happen.
Yeah.
For some people.
Absolutely, yeah. And when it always does, you're just like, oh my God, what a
Where did
miracle.
that come from?
Yeah.
All right, Peter, I've got one more question for you. And what I'd like you to do is finish the sentence for me.
Okay.
All right? If writing has taught me anything, it's taught me what?
It's taught me to work really, really, really hard at the craft and then let it all go and trust.
Let it all go. What does it feel like when you let it all go? How do you know the difference between I'm not letting it go, I am letting it go?
When you let it all go, it's what you said, you disappear and you become immersed, and then it's almost like you're reliving a past life, as if you were reincarnated. I mean, it all feels inevitable. It's all happening, you feel it happening as if you're there. You're completely transported.